Another invitation, and I have yet to do it, is to rename yourself or put in the chat what organization or retreat center you belong to or with or represent.
That's a good girl. She's so smart. So smart.
Great, Isabel, welcome.
Thank you.
Here, Scott. Girl, sit. Good. Let's go do this.
All right, looks like we have a great mix of people. I think we'll get started to honor our 90 minutes together. Ben, would you like to kick us off with welcome and announcements?
I would love to. Thank you. Welcome everyone to our community call on hybrid programming, online programming, in-person programming, any kind of programming that we can imagine, and maybe sometimes there's kinds we don't even know about yet that we're going to discover today. So I'm glad that we have such a broad selection of folks here from all around the country to have this conversation with us. I wanted to let you know about a couple of our other upcoming conversations in case you didn't see those. July 13th, so a few weeks from now, we're going to be continuing our land legacies conversation. I've written an essay that I put in the RCC blog to try to synthesize what we've been discussing so far about land and legacy. And we've got 4 more voices to share with us different perspectives on what's happening at retreat centers around land and legacy on July 13th. On July 27th, we'd like to take some time to connect with folks who are newer to the RCC and learn a little more about each other. So a little more relationship building, and then more exploration on what's possible in terms of collaboration with each other. I think our makeup keeps shifting a little bit, and sometimes it's good to kind of regroup and see who's in the room and what we have in common and what we want to do together. And related to that, I know most people here have already added your center to our network map and our geographic map, but I wanted to put a link in the chat in case you haven't added yourself. This Google form gives me the information to add your center to the map so that we can all see how we intersect. So there's some questions there about what online programming you're doing right now, and some questions about your mission statement and how long you've been around as a center, just some real basic public information. So if you want to fill that out, if you haven't filled that out, that'd be great. And I can talk more about the maps another time, maybe July 27th. So those are my announcements. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Ben. It's wonderful to see all of you on this rainy day in the Poconos of Pennsylvania. I'm not sure the climate where you all are, but it's good to be in community. This has been an ongoing thread in many of our conversations. Today's topic of any type of programming, on-site, online, hybrid, in-person, all of the words you'd like to use. We quite haven't settled on collective terminology, but I think this conversation will head us into a journey of navigating what programming looks like at retreat centers and other organizations. I'm really excited because it's not just Ben and I talking today. We've invited some retreat centers who have done hybrid programming and online and on-site programming in this past year. Before I introduce them and we'll leave space for questions at the end, I'd like to just settle us into this space. And so just get comfortable in your chair or wherever you're standing or sitting. If you can, put your feet firmly on the ground and just settle in to this community. Let go of the meetings you had before this and table in your mind what you're headed off to next. I'd like to share a poem that hopefully also weaves another thread. Early on, we've been meeting over the last 15 months. Early on, there was a poem shared about old maps no longer working. I think several of us have used it in our own retreat centers as well. I know Kirkridge, the retreat center I work at, has used it often during COVID-19. And I think the old maps were showing us that there are new ways to live into this space, new ways to be a retreat center organization, new ways to build community. And this today is talking about new ways to build community around programming. So I'd just like you to close your eyes if that feels comfortable to you. And I'm going to read the short poem and then ask for 2 minutes of silence around a question I'll give at the end. So the poem For the One Admiring Vintage Maps by Morgan Harper Nichols. You can make notes of the well-known streets and draw out trails from well-traveled paths. But even then, even the most detailed maps in the world can only reveal so much to you. Until you get up and go, stepping out boldly into the unknown, you have absolutely no idea of what all you will find. But that's the beauty of traveling through life. This is how you will learn to stay strong. You don't have to know everything to know that taking brave and faithful steps will lead us where we belong. The invitation to silence is to sit with the question, what brave and faithful steps are you and your retreat center taking? Call you back in 2 minutes. Thank you, everyone. The invitation is to sum up your reflection or thoughts. And you're welcome to use the chat if it so moves you to share something about where you're at or where your retreat center is at in those steps that really felt unknown 15 months ago and still may feel very unknown. But my hope is this conversation today will give more possibilities and options, with knowing that what we share today is not the only step, or it might not be the right direction for you and your retreat center. That's okay. I'm really excited for the conversation today with Deepa to hold that space for asking those big questions. So today's outline is inviting 3 retreat centers to share their experience in very different experiences related to what it looks like to work with retreat facilitators, participants, and technology to offer programming in new and different ways. So I'm going to invite Arleen and Liz and Frank into this space. And then my hope is to ask questions after. I know Arleen has to go in about 20 minutes, so I want to respect her time. They'll each share for about 10 to 12 minutes. I welcome you to put in questions that you have in the chat if they're specific to that person or just for the community to hold. And then we'll try and get to those questions after each person spoke. And knowing that this is a continuous conversation. So Arleen is a steering committee member on the Retreat Center collaboration. I'm just so excited she's here. She's wonderful energy and has a lot to share. So Arleen, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Arleen Peterson. I work for the Poor Handmaids of Jesus Christ, Order of Catholic Sisters here in Plymouth, Indiana. They have about 1,100 acres here in their Donaldson campus, and they have some other ministries across the Midwest. Here on our campus, we have what's called our Lindenwood Conference and Retreat Center, which can house about 102 bedrooms, individuals in bedrooms that we have here. It actually used to be the sisters' old high school, that convent that they stayed in. And then we also have on our campus Moon Tree Studios, which is kind of an art-based studio that can host small retreats. And then we are in the development of a new retreat center called Illuminata House, which is very, it has like a cob house and very private and small retreats, kind of a hermitage where folks can come on retreat. And so that's kind of what's a part of our campus here. And when the pandemic hit, we had been doing some small kind of hybrid ways of kind of bringing all of our ministries together through Zoom for meetings and things like that. And then we thought, well, why not expand this opportunity out to do our retreats? Now, I have to preface to say that as a retreat center and as the directors of our retreat centers, we are not that experienced, I could say, in being a host or hosting a virtual retreat. We really kind of branched into connecting with other places that may be offering a virtual retreat and then being able to show that retreat here on our campus and involve kind of our sisters and other individuals to participate in that. And so that's kind of really been our focus in terms of our retreats. We really want to get a little bit better at doing the virtual piece of it all. But probably the biggest thing that you're going to need is the equipment. And so I'm really going to talk to you in terms of and actually show you the equipment that we've used. And I even have a list provided of all the equipment and links to Amazon that you can even just purchase all the equipments and kind of the price of what we paid for it in terms of kind of the entire setup. And so I'm going to show you what our kind of equipment looks like. So let me do this. And I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to share this. Okay, so can everybody see that?
Yes.
I lost my view button to see everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see you and we can hear you.
Okay, there we go. Now I see some people. Okay. So this is our lovely Zoom setup. We paid for an actual Zoom room. So we have kind of a separate number set up for the room. It's all set up on this little base here area. It includes the TV screen. It has an iPad. It also has a small computer. It has a speaker system set up to it so that you can kind of really project in the room. And then the one piece that you can't see in my loveliness of taking pictures, let me show you this other picture. See if this works. Oh my goodness, here we go. Share. There we go. On top of the TV screen is the camera, because that's probably the biggest thing that you have to think about is your room size. Kind of how big of a room are you trying to kind of engage the people in the room to be a part of a session? And the camera makes a huge difference. And so this is in, and the whole entire unit is portable. So it's all on a stand that we could actually move this from one room to another room in Lindenwood. And we have about 5 or 6 big conference kind of room areas. The largest room can fit up to 100 people in chairs to be able to view this particular session. And so again, it allows people to be engaged in the room, along with kind of if there's an individual that's kind of presenting on the screen there. And the weird part about it is that the TV is where kind of your main speaker or individuals may be a part of the session. Sometimes we may hook it up to the TV, or we may hook it up to the actual projector screen, so that then you can see more individuals and people participating in the actual meeting. But this has kind of been what we've done and what we've used since probably June of last year, when we started kind of being able to offer individuals who couldn't, come on site to participate in a particular event. We had an icons painting retreat that was here on campus, and they were able to have different individuals come in while they were painting in the room, come up and kind of show their picture on screen to different individuals who were participating, elsewhere. And so this was kind of our setup. It's portable, it's heavy, it's extremely heavy. We had to kind of move it around to different spots in our building, and it became kind of, it can be a nuisance, especially if you're trying to put it in an elevator and take it to another floor and things like that. But it's worked out really well in terms of being able to see individuals in the room and engage with the people in the room, but also have the engagement of individuals who may be on Zoom and to be a part of that actual session. There's probably a lot more other little technical pieces about it, but that's pretty much kind of what we've been able to use to help us really with the entire setup. And then I'm going to place in the chat a listing of all the different equipments and materials that we're using in terms of that engagement that we're having. And like I say, so far, I think it's been pretty great. To be able to have people in other places to still be able to engage. And we're excited that upcoming with Liz at the Genesis Center and Sister Joan Chittister, we're going to have all of our sisters and individuals in the room participating with Genesis and Sister Joan Chittister. And so we're excited to see kind of how that works. But you got to have at least 1 or 2 people kind of helping to manage and maintain the room in terms of like the camera, if you need to move the camera or you need to switch the views and things like that when it comes to Zoom. So having a couple of people that are a little bit versed in how the setup works really helps to kind of make for a smooth transition between kind of folks in the room doing breakouts and having, what's being seen on the screen. Okay. So that's mine in a nutshell.
Arleen, thank you so much for taking the first go and really thinking micro and logistical. And before you run off, just a quick question as we transition to Frank and Liz. Was there a moment for Lindenwood that you said, yes, this is the way we're going, that we will have Zoom capabilities because it meets the needs? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that decision-making that you went through, that process of discernment?
We, at the time, this was in June 2020, and it was like no end in sight between COVID. And it's like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to engage with people and still have that engagement and be able to have breakouts and things like that? And so, again, we had been doing it as across our ministries, because we have folks in all different kind of places anyway, as a part of the Poor Handmaids. We have folks in all different kind of cities, St. Louis, Gary, Indiana, Fort Wayne. So it's always somewhat been a part of how we meet. This just became very real in terms of, if folks can't come together and gather, how can we still be able to create that kind of atmosphere and engagement and to be a part of those things? And so it just became like, it was a no-brainer. We had some money set aside to pay people to come to retreats, and we were like, forget it, we're just going to invest the money into the equipment to make sure that we have that available.
Arleen, thank you so much. I know you have to scoot.
Okay, as a question, the audio quality, especially for folks who are remote trying to dialogue going in person. We, as a part of our entire kind of room system setup, we have a very sophisticated audio system already installed in our conference rooms. So it kind of fits right within that. The issue is always, there are a set of speakers, additional speakers that are a part of the setup that we have to help amplify folks in the room. And then we always, again, recommend, if anybody's at home, that they're actually using earphones to kind of block out a lot of noise in order to kind of really be able to hear everything that's happening in the room and a part of the session. Any other questions? It's very technical.
I think, yeah, just one more on the technical thread. In your setup in those conference rooms, do you have a microphone at each chair? Like, are there microphones built into the desk?
So let me see let me pull the picture up again. So down at the bottom of the picture, you see the little white thing, that's the iPad. Right in front of the iPad, there's a little square little box. That box is actually part of the speaker system. And then the little black box with the green lights on it, that's also part of the speaker system that's helping to kind of amplify and keep everybody's voice as clear as possible in the room. Any other questions? All right, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you would like to, could you share your email in the chat, as I know you have to go and there might be other questions throughout, or I'll try and manage the questions if there are more logistical ones for you.
Yep, and I just put in the chat the Zoom equipment with all of the links in a PDF file, so that if folks have that, but more than happy to have any conversations in terms of, you know, there are all these little tricks in terms of that we've been learning over time in terms of, well, you can't hear the speaker or you can't see someone, and it's really so important to have a couple of people that help to manage when you're having that actual session to happen.
Thanks so much, Arleen.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Wonderful. So I think Arleen set us up nicely to know the micro, as I said, and also her shared learnings. Next, I invite Liz from Genesis to speak. You may have seen her name pop up if you're part of the Mighty Network RCC home and community, as she's been promoting a collaborative programming that is both on site and online. So Liz, thanks for sharing your wisdom as well.
Thank you, Justine and everybody. So I'm grateful to be sharing with you all today, and I will try to make my thoughts coherent. I was hoping to pull together a slideshow, but I've been covering for the cook the last 2 days, and so literally just got finished blending a beet and cucumbered chilled soup for this evening. So there are a couple of learnings. Genesis had our first virtual presenter for a program where people were gathered on site in July 2019. So we'd had a number of experiences since then, but pre-pandemic, with having a presenter from afar, but people gathered in community to view. With the pandemic, we then started having, for example, our Easter Triduum in 2020, we had the 4 presenters on site, but all the participants were virtual. And then subsequent to that, we've had presentations where the presenters were on site and there was a combination of in-person and through Zoom participants. And we've had presenters through Zoom, and the audience was also mixed on site and through Zoom. And we've had some programs where we had presenters who were both on site and through Zoom, and audience members who were on site and through Zoom. So the couple of things that we have found most important when navigating these multiple possibilities is, the first thing is, once everybody's logged on, and this was certainly true early in the pandemic, that everybody had so much anxiety about the technology, anxiety about living in the pandemic, that to begin with the soothing moment. And so Justine did a beautiful example of that, grounding us in a sense of presence and inviting people into their own embodied presence in the moment. Because I still feel there are some people whose approach to a Zoom retreat is to be listening intellectually, but be totally disconnected from their embodied presence. And that's where the spirituality can be felt as a presence. So to begin with that, and I even make a joke of it saying, let's all let our technology anxiety just melt away. And, you can see people laughing with that. And so just to allow people to come into the moment, to be ready to receive whatever the prayer presentation ritual is. So then once you've kind of centered, and this is something you'll want to think about ahead of time, but then the question becomes, where is the focus? And by that, what I mean is, we have learned that if I'm the presenter and I'm speaking to my lap, so we do all this with laptops and LCD projectors. We did not buy any extra technology so far, although we are going to get a couple of enhancing pieces for sound. But if I'm the presenter and you're looking at me and you're all on Zoom, but if I have audience members that are looking at me, then I can present and the audience is looking at me and you all are looking at me. If, however, we want the audiences to be able to see each other for a sense of community, then you might think about adding a second laptop so that there's one laptop pointed at or camera, whatever you want, one pointed at the audience and one pointed at the presenter. If the presenter is speaking and the images are projected behind, what we have found is that people in the room will attune to what's being projected instead of the person in the room. And we've also found that for the presenter, the presenter tends to think about focusing towards the camera, and then you miss the connection with the people in the room. So to actually mindfully be speaking to the people in the room, so that it's not that the people in the room are actually also watching a virtual presentation. So this is where I'd hope to have little diagrams to kind of show what I'm talking about, but I think you can imagine into what I'm saying. And so that's where you can make choices about if you do a webinar function or if you do a meeting. Like right now, I've got everybody on gallery view. Well, if you want everyone to just be focused on the presenter, and sometimes we do that, we just lock it down so they're only looking at the presenter. When we've done ritual, when we've done Eucharist, we like to have one of the laptops pointed at the actual elements. And so there's the whole question about, do you want the presider to actually be on screen or not? Our presiders don't have a hang up about not being on screen. Some might. So that's something you'll want to talk through and think through. So there's a staging element. There's a lighting element. We have very poor lighting in our primary conference room for this sort of thing. So we've done a little bit of lighting enhancements with small devices that light up the presenter. In terms of sound and audio, we definitely have had challenges and we've worked things out. We actually learned how to use some of the technology that we had where we can sync the sound from a laptop to the sound system in the room. But in terms of having people in the room be able to share in the conversation, you either want to create a system where people can walk up and sit where, like if I'm the presenter, I would actually get up and move aside and let somebody sit and ask a question or share what they're going to share. And then you form the queue so that that keeps moving. Or the other way we've dealt with it is just with audio, having somebody walk around and pass the microphone. And again, especially during COVID, we didn't want to be passing the microphone from person to person. So we would have somebody in the room to actually walk the mic around. So if you're doing something where it's one person speaks after the other, then it's sequential. But if you're doing a popcorn style, so there are these different ways to think about what is the kind of sharing space and the kind of participation space you want to set up. Let's see. We also decided that if we thought we were going to offer programs that would have a virtual component, that we mandated, so to speak, that all the session lengths were no more than like 50 minutes of talking, and then we would take a break. So even if a presentation was going to be 90 minutes, that we do take a break during it, even if it's just 2 minutes of stretching. So to keep in mind the Zoom fatigue, we also we narrowed the time frame of our sessions and we elongated the break in between sessions so that people can really get away. We encourage them to go outside or do other activities in between because it can be long days of sitting. We have done directed retreats where people are meeting one-on-one with a spiritual companion and then coming together for some group prayer. And then most of our retreats have been the guided type where everybody comes together for a presentation. So this is the other thing, as people have gotten more savvy with technology, we actually got to the point recently where we were able to mix breakout groups between people in the room and people on technology because people would use their phones, like they're on site here, they'd use their phones, they'd go into a different room so that the audio, that's the other thing, you don't want to deal with feedback. So you have to deal with like who's speaking, who's muted, all of that. But people would go into different rooms and they could join breakout rooms with people through Zoom. So that was another cool thing that we were able to figure out. And having said that, I am going to just do the quick commercial. As Arleen said, all of you are invited, if your centers would like to join our presentation by Sister Joan Chittister on July 19th. I'm going to spend the first half hour doing what I talked about, which is setting the tone and calling out the roll call of the community of communities that are joining this experience. And then Sister Joan's going to talk for about an hour. Her topic is spiritual life. It's all about relationship. And we're hoping to use this as a catalyst for movement out of the pandemic. We're going to have breakout groups afterwards, on site or virtual. And if your center would like to participate in this and promote it as your event that you're collaborating with Genesis, please see me about that. Or if you just want to do it as your own self, and I will put my email in the chat. And I think I hit all my high points.
Liz, thank you so much. I see a question from Mary Jo, and I'm just going to hold that because there might also be in this community other people who have insights and feedback. But Liz, thank you so much for sharing that as you are mid-journey into this process. And I'm going to invite Frank, who's new to the Retreat Center collaboration. Welcome, Frank, also new to his current role, speaking about Dharmakaya and holding space for a hybrid program as well. So Frank, would you like to introduce yourself and a little bit about your Retreat Center too before you talk about the programming?
Sure, no problem. Hi, everybody. My name is Frank Raffele. I'm the Executive Director of the Dharmakaya Center for Wellbeing. We are our foundation is Tibetan Buddhism. But our Wellbeing Center is really just about everything. So our focus here is really just teaching people about meditation. If they don't want to learn about Buddhism, that's okay too. So it's just really more about meditation. And so we have everything here from yoga retreats, Reiki retreats, meditation, Buddhist, pretty much anything you can imagine that has to do with well-being. And it's kind of interesting, the conversation that we're going to have today, where we did a pretty complex hybrid program last September, but we've pretty much been open virtually all through the pandemic. So we had a couple months that we closed. Just to give an example, this year we closed over the winters because it was slow, but as of March, we've been open since March in person. In fact, we haven't done any in-person meeting. I mean, any online meetings. Everything we do is in person, and we've been busy every single weekend with a different program. And during the week, we have personal retreatants that come in. So we've been very, very busy in having people here. We just put a lot of COVID safety precautions in place, and people seem to really enjoy it and love it. And so it's been we've been pretty busy this year in terms of going forward. In fact, we're busy every single week. We're booked out every weekend in terms of retreat from now till mid-November. So we've kind of taken advantage of both of those things, but being in person has been a great advantage to us and really helped out a lot. And just so you know, in case you don't know Dharmakaya, it really was just built a few years back. It was finished being built around 2017. Started really doing some programs in 2018 as we were still getting through some legal issues, and then started up. And as you can imagine, we started and then stopped because of COVID for a little bit, and then started back up again. So I've been here for about, I don't know what it's been now, maybe 3 months now. And so my job's kind of like doing a restart of everything, and it's going very, very well so far. I come from an entrepreneurial background, even though I've been a Buddhist for over 30 years. So that's the quick part about me, I guess. Is that okay? Did I cover that well? Okay. So let me kind of jump right in and kind of go. I have a little PowerPoint for us to go through, which will talk a little bit, hopefully answer questions. But again, any questions you have at the end, be happy to go through. So let me kind of share my screen. If I can find the right one to share. And there we go. So designing a hybrid program, just so you know, the program that we have, obviously, I just kind of told you that. That's what we're all about. So we have our key program is in September, where our founder, Rinpoche Gyalwai, does a program here and usually does it live in September. So as you can imagine, last year he couldn't do it live. We usually have lamas on site living here full time to help people that come and want to speak about meditation or want to speak about Buddhism. They live here, where they have their own apartment here, but everybody had to leave when COVID was here. So we had nobody on site except for those of us who work here, but we didn't have any lamas or Rinpoches here on site. So discovering the Dharma last year being one of our biggest programs of the year, we couldn't do it. So Rinpoche couldn't be here. We couldn't do it live, if you will. So we had to do it. We had to figure out very quickly, how do we do this online? And that's what we ended up doing. So that's what we're going to talk about. So it's our signature program. We usually have people here for at least 5 days. We'll have a lot of people who will stay here on site on the campus. Our campus is about 90 acres. We have 4 buildings. 2 of them are resident halls. One of them is our what you'll call the reception hall with a dining area there. And then we also then have the main meditation hall, which is a very large, beautiful meditation hall, about a 40-foot ceiling, has a library in there, and then has 2 apartments for the lamas that are here. But it's our signature program of the year. It gets obviously the most amount of people that are here for that. So we didn't want that to miss out for people, not just for us, but because of the family that we have here. It's a very important program to everybody. We want to make sure we still provide something for them last year in doing that. So doing to give you an idea of what it's about on site and online. When we did it, our retreatants, we could have a maximum of 30 retreatants. This is in the midst of COVID. We could only have 30 retreatants here on site, 13, I'm sorry. So we had 13 on site, and then live streaming on Zoom is what we're doing. The teachers, Rinpoche was off-site, and we had 3 additional teachers off-site as well. So that was kind of the format of what we had. The functional challenges we had is basically we were running 2 simultaneous retreats, which you kind of heard about already today, that we were doing it live with people in the room, and then doing it, for people actually all around the world that were tuning in, besides the fact that we had teachers off-site and teachers on-site. And then we were dealing with multiple time zones, which I'll show you in a second, basically dealing with people from Asia and other parts around the world, and then obviously having teachers both online and in person. So the advantages we had to take advantage of was we had 100+ retreatants between online and in person participating. So that was wonderful that we were able to get that amount of people. But we had students from Asia, Europe, South America, and the Near East in terms of that. So now here's one of the key concerns is how do you schedule something like this in time zones that span 12 hours, right? So if you're talking about somewhere in within Asia, you're like a 12 to 13 to 14 hour different time zones. So what we had to do was obviously do things that it had to pay early in the morning or late at night, because it would be the opposite for everybody. If we did something at 8 a.m., might be 8, 9, or 10 p.m. somewhere else. If we did it in the morning, at night it would be for them. So that's how we had to arrange things going forward. And then the other thing was obviously online, as we've heard today as well, is how do you keep people engaged when you're having kind of like full day programs going on in terms of that. So that was our question. So here's the real questions that we asked, and we think you should ask yourself when you're going forward to do this is, how can we make this as human feeling as possible versus it's just something that's happening online? And we had a few things that we did for that. How we provide tech support, and we did that. I think, I don't know if we cheated or not. Basically, we said, this is not our expertise, so we're going to bring professionals in. So we brought professionals in to handle this whole thing instead of us kind of going forward. Let me give you an example. We had a retreat this last weekend, and in there we have an audio. And so they were doing a Reiki retreat, and they wanted to the lady had an iPod. I know a little out of date, but she had an iPod and wanted to connect it to the audio, and none of us could figure out how we had it plugged in. It just wasn't working. It took us literally almost an hour to go through a program and get it done. So when I'm thinking just an iPod to like a distributor, I'm just saying like, yeah, there's no way we're going to do any of this tech stuff by ourselves. So I think that was a smart move in doing forward. Should it be a meeting or a webinar, right? Webinar being that you're going to sit there and we're going to be lecturing to you. It should be a meeting where we're kind of engaging people as much as we can, going back and forth. Then the question becomes, how interactive do you want it to be so we can continue with this going forward? Again, that's more of a personal choice, I think, and you have to kind of decide how much material you have to get across. Because I think, as you all know, if you make it very interactive, people are asking questions, all of a sudden you can get into these questions that go off track, and you're like, okay, we need to bring this back. So I think my personal opinion is better to wait mostly to the end with that, or have people put things in the chat as you're going along. Are there portions of this that we can pre-record? So if we're doing something that's going to be a significant, again, it's not just a half day or one day program, it's a multi-day program. Is there something that maybe could be pre-recorded and we could then play and then do something after? So that's something to think about when you're doing things that you don't always have to be live. Outside of even this venue, other business things I've been involved in, we've done that as well for multiple day retreats where they've actually been recording of certain people. We brought the video up, let them do it, and then had kind of questions asked after, and we went from there. So it's a good way to do it. Long sessions can be tough on Zoom. How can we help make this a good experience for the people who are remote, if you will? And I think we just got some great advice before. So you take breaks in the middle, you have little, even if it's a 2-minute break, a 5-minute break, go do something, come back, keep people engaged as much as possible. Or at least if there are people on site, maybe have them do kind of their own little real breakout rooms in person and do discussions, then come back versus just Zoom breakout rooms. Advanced preparation. We hired a videographer, so we get all that handled because we had to have multiple cameras going. We boosted our internet speed and Zoom capacity, meaning we actually called our internet company and said, for these few days, we need more capacity. So we paid for extra there. Bought good video camera, microphone, green screen for remote streaming, and an enormous television for the outside retreat. So that way people could come in and actually see what was going on versus a small one. We got like I think it's like a 75-incher or something like that. It was a big one. Created background slides, transition slides with any group recitations on it. So things were all there for people to make it as easy as possible for them, and organized groups into Dharma centers across Asia with translators. So again, for us, we had people from all around the world, and we had people basically speaking in English. So we had to have people in different countries, obviously interpreting for the people that were there going forward. So it's a little complex for us in terms of that. And then you need to rehearse the whole thing ahead of time when you're doing it. That's with your technology people, with your presenters, go through it nice and smooth in terms of going forward. You will come across mistakes as you do it, so it's best to do that rehearsal. And then getting the final setup. We have a few pictures here to share with you. So You can see this is our meditation center inside, and it's a pretty big room. You can't see it all here, but you got an idea of the final setup. So here was the, as we called, command central, if you will. We had a couple of cameras going, had people sitting there kind of going through everything. And here's another shot of it. So you saw that we had multiple cameras going and multiple screens going. Just so you guys know, my background out of college, I'm in television production. So I came out and it was, I wasn't part of this, but when you're doing something like that, where if you're going to have multiple cameras, multiple screens, and you're trying to feed it into one, it's like doing a live television show. And if you've never seen that or done it, it's very complex. You have many monitors, different things, and they're all feeding into one, right? So you have this, okay, camera one, go here, camera two, go there, and you need, if you want to do it right, you need a right machine to do that, and it's expensive. That's why we paid professionals to come in to make this as smooth as possible for what we were doing. And again, you can keep it simple, but if you're doing a bigger type of event like this, you might want to invest in it and just make that part of your cost if people are paying for it, and it just builds into your budget, that's all. The roles that we had Rinpoche was our teacher, and then we also had senior students. That was a master of ceremonies. He led the walking meditation, the guided meditation, and on-site group discussion. We had a second senior student that posed for questions from online students, guided meditation, and led online group discussion, and a third one that led yoga. So we had different people there really helping to go through, and the actual presenters that were going forward. And our videographer, we had one we called the Zoom master that led the online discussion, Zoom master that did the chat monitoring, recording, led online discussion, and then a runner who was going in between the two. So somebody who's going to be kind of running the whole thing is really important to have that, but then you need that person who's going to be, who's looking at questions, who's going here, and going through that type of thing. So you want to make sure that every little thing is thought about as you go through that. And then we had, I don't know how well you can see this, but it just really to show you the complexity of, we had a master schedule of exactly what was going on at different times, who was responsible for it, so what we were doing, where, and then who would be doing that different type of thing. So that way everybody knew ahead of time exactly what their role was. It was clear, and we could always kind of go through that. So it's just really more about organization than anything else was the key. As much as I'm saying this, it seems very complex, it wasn't that it was difficult, that it took a lot of organization to do in what we were doing, right? And then we learned on the fly, and this is an example of, we had kind of some yoga stuff going on, and if you can see the screen behind her, you see her in the screen, and we had that kind of mirror effect where it's like, it was her behind her, behind her, behind her, behind, like, so we were kind of like, yeah, it's probably not the best way to do it going forward. So we ended up just using a logo after that behind her versus doing like the, 100 yoga teachers in the room type of thing in terms of that. So that's what we did the logo after, right? And then here's the key learnings we got is to always be announcing things over and over, especially to the people that are tuning in from online, right? So you're in a waiting room and we're waiting for one of the instructors to start something. It's supposed to start at 1 o'clock and it's now 1:03, 1:04, 1:05. And remember you have people from around the world tuning in, and now it's just kind of like, they're like, what's going on? Did I miss it? Am I not in the right place? So you got to be announcing over and over to them. It'll be a few more minutes. This is going to be happening. So keeping them going forward. You want to keep it moving, make sure people are staying interested. And then you have to explain and demonstrate everything that you're going to do. To give an example, now you can imagine these were all, pretty much everybody who's a Buddhist was kind of tuning into this. And we talked about walking meditation, very common in Buddhism. And we did it, and people were saying, well, what do you mean by that? It's like, oh, well, we thought that was obvious. So we had to kind of show what we meant by walking meditation, and we had to demonstrate that going forward. So what are things for people to do? Stay connected, again, communicate with people all the time, and keep practicing what you're doing for next time to make sure it's going smooth. And again, keep announcing things over and over. At the beginning of the retreat, give a complete overview to what will happen each day. At the start of every session, reiterate what will happen. And then between each session, give a nod of what's coming up next. I think there's an old saying, tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them what you've told them. That's pretty much what you're looking for. Keep moving. For your online audience, 3 minutes is a lifetime. Make sure you're communicating with them going forward. Practice the setup and be ready, so switchovers are as short as possible. Explain and demonstrate, as I said before. You want to make sure you're going through everything at the beginning of every program. What are we going to be doing? What's it going to look like? Bring everybody through that practice in terms of making sure they know what's going to be happening going forward. And then provide detailed instructions for what to do between sessions so everybody's on that same page. Stay connected. As I said before, keep everything, monitor the chat, email to the chat, look at questions that are going on, respond immediately to questions, even if you don't have the answer, at least just say, hey, we got your question. We'll be getting back to you soon on that. So people are aware that they're being taken care of going forward with that. And have a mailing list prepared to send Zoom link as backup prior to each starting session, really important. Keep practicing, check light and sound with each online presenter at the start of each session before letting those online in, right? So don't assume everything's working well. Assume it's not working well and check it every time and accept that mistakes will be made. As we say to people is, look, if you're worried that something's gonna go wrong during this, if that's a worry of yours, do not worry about it. Something will definitely go wrong during this. So don't worry about that. And then bonus learnings, mute everyone on Zoom and disable screen sharing by anyone but the host. Try to limit questions to one per person and don't jam in too much. Zoom is exhausting. Keep it simple going forward. People have a richer experience when there's less, but they're getting more out of it. Have patience. We asked for patience from everybody multiple times through it. We gave gratitude for patience, and we tried to have patience ourselves in going through that to make sure we were doing the right thing. So that basically what I'll kind of stop the share. There you go. So I'm sorry that was a lot. I don't know if I went over my time, but I apologize if I did. But I hope that helped. And again, it's kind of a big event for us, but just wanted to share whatever we had. So thank you.
Ooh, thank you, Frank. Just let's all take a breath after that. That was a lot of learnings that you just gave to all of us. So thank you so much.
And I can talk pretty quick. I'm from New York, so it's kind of.
No one noticed. What a treat. Ben, I was watching Ben take notes, and I'll tell you, he was just going a mile a minute. So it was a lot of information, and I think a wealth of information as we look to learning. And what I so appreciate about Arleen, Liz, and Frank's sharing is that they've learned through mistakes and learned through great experiences. And then for those who maybe haven't dabbled yet, can share that. And part of that is honoring that there might be some questions. Since this is a lot of information, it might feel some uncertainty about this. We just want to hold on to logistical questions. We have maybe about 10 minutes to ask questions. And then I'm going to invite Deepa, who's been working with the Fetzer Institute on virtual sacred space, into asking those larger or bigger questions about what this means for the future of our programming of retreat centers. So I do think there was a question a bit earlier. Let's see, where did that question go? From Mary Jo. And Liz, well, you were speaking, but I invite everyone. Have you figured out a way that people can pray together out loud? We like to close with our Father, but I have to ask people to mute and one person lead the prayer. Does anyone have any insights in that could help Mary Jo?
One possibility isn't a number of people speaking at the same time, but to have it set up so that one person does a phrase and the next person does the next phrase and the third person does the third phrase, so that there's more of a community mixed in with the prayer, even though they're still hearing just one voice. But it takes a little coordination, as Frank was saying, that the preparation is the key.
Thank you, Sister Sue. I've heard other retreat centers share that as well, that it can be linked or popcorned even to feel like community bridges. Are there other logistical questions or tech questions? Christina?
Greetings, everyone. I was curious for Frank, the piece around the walking meditations, was that filmed and then projected to the online participants? Or did the online participants go off with the directions? And have you had experience with both of those or just the latter, as I see your head shake?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so What we did is when we did the talk about the walking meditation, we had one of our senior teachers kind of get up and kind of demonstrate what we meant with that. And I don't think it was people didn't know what walking meditation was as much as there's different ways you can do walking meditation. You can do like a regular pace and just kind of go with it, or you can do the other extreme is doing it very, very slowly where you're feeling every single element going forward. So that's what he kind of demonstrated for everybody, went through that and did it. And then after that, people went off and did it on their own. And then they did it in their own groups, in their own countries, wherever they were, to go do their walking meditation and then kind of come back and share from there. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure, thank you. And I'll just jump in. I love, and again, I can't talk from a prayer perspective, but when you're talking about sharing line by line in a prayer, I love that going from person to person. And one of the things that we've also done in certain things when we're together is, you know, at one point we'll unmic everybody please unmic yourself, and might read something together. So purposely you hear many voices, and it's kind of cool for just one section of it. Or if sometimes we just applaud, say, everybody please give great thanks to somebody, and you hear everybody applauding for whatever else. So sometimes getting everybody to unmute and do something together, you don't want to do it like for minutes because it gets crazy. But if you did something for 15, 30 seconds, it creates a great energy because you're like, wow, look, listen to everybody doing this. So I think doing it on your own and then bring everybody together is really cool in any function, not just in that. So just want to give my insight on that.
So I'm curious, have folks had experience with extended retreats? So sort of, you know, overnight retreats where you have a mix of in-person and remote. And so I work with the RCC, and we're specifically thinking about our steering committee coming together in August through a mix of regional pods as well as remote participation. And what it might take for folks for us to not preference the in-person experience and really sort of create a nourishing experience for all participants, while at the same time, you know, enjoying, right, and really, you know, being together for those who are in person. So that combination of in-person and remote over multiple days, in this case 3 days. But if anyone has experimented with that and what you've learned about what works.
We've done a fair amount of that. And some of the things you want to consider is, again, helping the folks who are online set up their space with some guidelines. So how are they going to create their silence? You know, even suggestions of don't turn on your TV the whole time. Who else is in the house with you, and how do you create space from that person? Any activity that you might choose to do, you might want to have a hands-on activity in a retreat. There might be coloring, there might be whatever. That all has to get sent to the online people beforehand with sufficient time so that they're going to receive it. And so if tonight we want you to sit with whatever, you know, you might want to explore some of the coloring sheets just as a different way of praying. They want to have that right there with them. So as much as you can think ahead, you want to do that. And also we even played around a little bit. I think Liz was talking about the chair with the director, but how do the online people and the in-house people engage during a meal? So the online people might also want to have a meal together, and somebody in-house might want to be in the chair, not the director, but having lunch with that group that's online. So that again, there feels to be some connection between the two, and it's not like we're going off to have your meal and oh, we're just have a break until we get back together again. So those are some of the things we've played around with so far that seem to be helpful.
Thank you.
Diane, I know I'm seeing you tomorrow, but I thought I'd just add a couple of things here because everyone else is. One was to also find a way that we buddied up the people that were online and those that were in person, and just asked them to do a check-in together every day. And we sort of said, do that on WhatsApp or go for a walk. And that was really nice because then there was a bit of intimacy. You didn't have to do it on Zoom. You could do it on your phone. And it was just a chance to kind of have that sort of sense of what was going on. And people found that really helpful because it didn't feel like they were so apart then.
Another thing that I might add is Dominican Center has also done like a hybrid retreat. As you know, we don't have a retreat center right now, so we've gone to doing it online, whether that be the presentation, and it is very much guided. But as Sister Sue mentioned, to kind of think of everything ahead of time, whether that be printing prayer cards that you can send out so that they have them, something that's tangible is very important. But we also did spiritual direction for people who were doing the retreat. So it took a matter of coordinating how many spiritual directors we would need for the amount of retreats, and then saying, when you register, these are the times that you have as an option to meet with the director. Have all of that scheduled out, have people fill those slots, and we would all coordinate everything with the technology. So if I'm running technology for the retreat, I would make sure that the director and the directee have that same link so that they can do a very personal individual through Zoom, while also bringing them in that first night, have all the directors on this Zoom meeting that we're doing online so that they're not complete strangers to one another. So they've been kind of acquainted with one another. And when we went as far as doing the virtual part and then actually doing it in a physical space, we had someone welcome them, but also allowed them to kind of explore the lands and the different things, and it had different activities at different stations. So it is very well self-directed in that way. And then, of course, like I said, that spiritual director that met with them kind of at the end, or bring everybody kind of back together. And those, it worked out very nicely because those participants saw each other on screen there at the very beginning, but were able to have conversation among themselves once they were in the actual physical space. So they kind of journeyed together if they chose to do that. And it's about fostering and building that relationship in the middle of being virtual and being present.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Yolanda, and everyone who chimed in. And I think that's a great bridge of building relationships. To invite Deepa to hold us in the last 30 minutes of this conversation. When I said, how should I introduce you? She said, just say we're old friends. And so we met last week to talk about this community call, and we're old friends, I feel. And I'm excited as to see where this goes, but she's been doing beautiful work on creating and holding virtual sacred space. And I just invite you, Deepa, to share your wisdom and invite the wisdom of the room in.
Thank you so much. I feel like I'm amongst a whole bunch of people that have been doing some wonderful experiments in the last year. And so that's a very nice feeling. And there seems to be this seems like a great place for mutual learning. So I'm feeling kind of grateful to be here. I just want to say a couple of things about myself and then a couple of things about what I'm doing with Fetzer before I sort of ask some of the questions that are coming up for me. So I run a very interesting retreat center as part of my work, which happens in the Swiss Alps every summer, where we build a camp from scratch, which runs on car batteries because we don't have electricity up there, and everything is kind of really back to being in nature. And then we do a program for 4 weeks, then we take 2 weeks to take everything down again and return the meadow to the cows. So it's an interesting, and it's been going for 30 years. So it's a very interesting center to be running in these times. And of course, like all of you, we've been going through changes. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to build a camp for the last 2 years. But I also spend time working, for the last 5 years, I've been working with refugees in Jordan, Syrian refugees, in a big camp there, which has 80,000 refugees. And for the last year, I've been working on a long distance project with them, looking at how to deal with COVID. And I'm currently also working with teachers in Delhi that are really thinking through how do we use online spaces and all kinds of technology to deal with high levels of grief and trauma. So that just kind of gives you a sense of, I'm spending a lot of time in different spaces looking at what hybrid means in all kinds of ways and for all kinds of people. And that's one of the things that really interested me about the Fetzer work, which when I was talking to Michelle, was how do we create sacred spaces in the virtual realm? That was the kind of big all-round question that we were asking. And that's from the nitty-gritty of looking at how do you create sacred hospitality within the virtual realm, but also in the terms of the work that you're all doing for retreat centers. And in that, we've been asking questions which are kind of what's happened here today, which is like, can we all share tips of how we're doing things? And then there's the next layer of questions, which is really about what does this mean for our world? Like, what is our world going to be look like? And for that, I've kind of been having conversations with artists and tech designers and educators and scientists and facilitators and spiritual teachers. And so just to give you a little bit of a flavor of some of that is, you know, with spiritual teachers, one of my interests has been, how are you doing initiations online? What's the impact of doing initiations online? How is this changing your way of even thinking about spiritual teachings and the impact of being in virtual spaces? And one teacher that I worked with said, you know, up until the pandemic, when we talked about breathing and really connecting with breath, and when I was working, I was just working with the people in the room. Now, when I'm online, I'm connecting by my breath with people all over the globe. And so suddenly there's this change in the way I'm using my breath and thinking of my breath. So there's interesting answers like that through to artists who are sort of talking about, I think, was it you, Sue, that mentioned the use of hands and how important it is for people to maybe be doing something like drawing or painting? All artists are talking about is how do we have embodied practice in this globalized virtual space? So in thinking about whatever you're creating, what's going to be the role of embodied practice to really help to do that? Right through to design, like I say, technological designers, and who I was sort of explaining to one of them that I was coming to have a conversation with all of you. And, you know, I was like, well, what are the latest things that I can say to them? Use this or use that. And the first thing that she said to me was, that's not the important question. The important question is, what is it that they really want to do? And if they know what they really want to do, then you can work out what technology you want to use. But don't do it the other way around in any way. So the question isn't, oh, we're going into hybrid space. What kind of technology do we want to use? The question that we have to ask at this point is, we're going into hybrid space, which I think is going to be around for a long time. What does this mean for the way you program on every level, right? Not just the levels that you're thinking of. And I'm seeing nods because I think you're all doing this anyway. But so this is me just kind of going, here, this is where you can go, oh, good, I'm doing that. Oh, I'd like to do that, because there isn't anything that you're not doing in any way. But that was the very clear advice. And then I asked another one, you know, because I was like, okay, that's great. But then I talked to another one. I was like, so what shall I say? Like there's swivel and there's owl, and then someone else mentioned this one, and which one? What should I say in terms of, and it was the same answer, the same answer. It's like the starting point has to be, what is it that you really want to achieve in this? And the next year, as far as they're all concerned, in terms of technology, is going to be a little bit like what happened with all of us with Zoom. We're going to go into this crazy period where there's going to be more and more bits of technology that are going to help us to navigate hybrid spaces. So the clearer we are about what we want to do, the easier it's going to be to find the different bits of technology that you're going to use to help you with it. I love the scope of what we've heard today from Genesis Farm, who are like, well, we're doing this with 2 laptops, right through to Frank, and you need a videographer. And that I think is always going to be what we're looking at in this space, to find the niche that really, really works for you. I've gone back to reading this beautiful book by Cynthia Bourgeault, The Wisdom Way of Knowing, which came out of Fetzer for her. And what I found really interesting about this book is she has a quote at the beginning, which I think applies now, which is, how you get there is where you'll arrive. How you get there is where you'll arrive. And that's from Alice in Wonderland. As I was coming to this conversation, I looked at the beautiful website of the RCC and looked at all of those amazing values that you have. You're looking at climate justice, you're looking at sustainability, you're looking at inclusiveness and accessibility. And it seems to me like that's going to be the founding for all of the programming that you're doing. And you've learned so many lessons about what it means to actually open up spaces to people around the world. So how these things are going to kind of be a part of what you do, I think is really critical. And you can do it in a way that nobody else can, because at the heart of what you're doing is this livingness. How do we live life at this point in terms of everything that we're facing? So while there is this interesting thing about what we have to learn from technology, I think the bit that we've forgotten about is that this is a two-way street, and there's a huge amount that needs to be learned from the contemplative retreat space to come the other way. And how we take that is going to be really interesting. Because that's kind of what's going to be needed more and more, as we can see. So I'd really like to, I think some of the spaces that we can create here is what happens when those of you that are here start meeting with some of the technologists that I'm speaking to, and practice soothing moments and do all of the different things that you've said, which I think will get us to somewhere that we've not been before. Which we're going to do in these strange little places. Now, you can already do that in each of your retreat centers in terms of who you might invite into your conversations about where you're going next. And can you take advantage of really thinking about who some of those people might be, to see how this practice of the retreat space can actually infuse the ways in which we're looking at the world in different ways. I think if that was I think that to me is what's most exciting about this time that we're in, to have conversations with people that we might not necessarily have conversations with in the way that we build the things that we're doing. I think the word hybrid, I know from Justine that you kind of all went, well, is hybrid the right word? Like, we're throwing this word around. Do we all actually, do we all mean the same thing by what we mean, when we use this word? And what a retreat center does in 5 years' time is going to look so, so different. Like, just even in this conversation, I was thinking about how we've talked just about the technology of Zoom and what we're going to do here, but there is so much more. Like, what does that YouTube part look like of a retreat center? What happens when I can download some of those walking meditations and go? We did that last summer, just posted a whole bunch of walking meditations on our website that people could just download and go for a walk with. There's going to be so many different ways that you're going to be able to actually meet the need of the people that want to be in a retreat space. But all of that is going to require a different level of conversation between all of these spaces. And I think the more kind of different pilots that we can do in these coming years, both together in some of the ways that you're supporting each other and with others, will hopefully take us to actually kind of share this work in a way that meets all of the values that you're talking about, from climate justice to sustainability to any of the things that you've listed. So I loved what Liz said about anxiety. Like, we had the kind of anxiety meltdown of like, how's this technology going to work? What's going to happen here? And I think we're now in the next period of anxiety, which is, how is this hybrid space going to work? And what do I do about it? And what do I need? And so I'm looking at all of you and thinking, what are the kind of concerns that you might have as you're moving into this space? And what do you feel are the resources that you might need? Because the questions that you pose now will really be helpful for me as I'm kind of finishing up these this work that I'm doing with Fetzer to really sort of move us on in this dimension of virtual sacred spaces. Anyone, any question and any concern. And I always say, if there's any part of you that's like, well, that's just silly, I can't say that, those are the ones that I really want to hear, because those are the ones that are going to make that, take us to the next level that we want to get to. So that's my encouragement for where we go next.
I love your, hi everybody. Deepa, I love what you are saying, and I love your idea of the walking meditations and you mentioned it was on your website. Could you give us that website, please?
Sure. I don't know if they're on there anymore, so maybe I'll send it to you. I think we might have taken them off, but we literally just posted them on our website, and you could download it.
Okay.
It was in, yeah, I think we took them off from last year.
I'm sorry. How long are they typically?
Well, so we had two lots. There was one which was, someone had done like a 40-minute meditation. So it was like you walked with them for 40 minutes, and it was a poetry-based meditation. So they were reading poetry and making, and then someone else had done a walk which was actually about connecting to plants. And even though they didn't know the plants that you were seeing, they were just asking you the questions to kind of make a note of what you were seeing as you walked. And then there was one that was a very specific, walking meditation in the way that Frank might talk about them. So it was that thing, if you can use the word walking meditation, it could mean all kinds of things, right? So it was, yeah.
You could almost call it Visio Divina too, just to walk in nature.
Right.
And that's I love this idea. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Should I be looking at chat?
I will, Deepa, I'll keep my eyes on chat, knowing that we have 10 minutes left, but this is such an opportunity to shake off or talk about at least the anxieties or uncertainties as we look to the future.
I hear conversation about that walking or meditation types of prayers. Just throwing out there's a couple of things that Dominican Center has been working on that's been very successful. We have been doing a centering prayer that we scheduled for every Tuesday at noon, and everybody kind of comes in. So there's different things that we could be doing to make our programs more interactive. Like I said, we have that centering prayer, we have different types of meditation prayer, we have breath prayer. So I just want to like throw things out there. I mean, I know that most of these are not new to any of you, but that there is a whole lot more that we can be either learning about or trying to incorporate so that things become more interactive rather than just staring at a presenter, you know, and the different types of sessions or offerings that we could be doing. We actually also talked about Alexio Divina, and there's so many more to choose from, but just wanted to throw that out there.
Gina, I love your question. I'd like to answer it on a number of different levels. One of the conversations that I was having was that apparently Stanford are now doing a course in ritual design. And to me, that's really fascinating that Stanford are doing a course on ritual design, because it's like there's one part of me that says, if I was to think about what modern day colonization looks like, then I think it's Stanford doing a course on ritual design. So I think what's going to happen is, on one level, we're seeing more and more of, every workplace is doing how we set intentions, all kinds of how we do mindfulness. We're seeing this whole thing that's going on within workplaces. And I have a feeling that out of those, there'll be people whose hearts are kind of sparked, and they're going to go looking for what's next. And so there'll be a whole thing about how retreat centers become open to that new wave. And I think we need to be doing that consciously rather than just waiting in one way. So let's take what's coming out of that Stanford ritual design course and make sure that actually there's some really cool retreat centers and places like that on that course to sort of go, now go do that work somewhere. Yeah, you might have done a 3-day workshop here. So that's one level of it. I think if I think about retreat centers, that they're places of belonging, right? There's a sense of that comes, which you've got again in the work that you're doing here. I think that that won't just be physical. I think people will have virtual connections with virtual spaces, with physical spaces, that they will feel that they're part of them if we get this programming part right next, in terms of how we build these hybrid programs, how we really build those communities that are connecting from all over the world. So that's why I think this is such an important moment to really give ourselves that space to think, so that your retreats, that you might be, connected to your retreat center, but living, I don't know, in France or whatever it is, we'll start seeing that sense of belonging for places, because whatever we say, I think our senses will just take on a different level of attunement. So we'll be able to smell a retreat center. Can I say that? And you know what I mean, right? So that's what I mean about where we're headed, but we need to be truly involved in that journey to sort of really get us there. And platforms aren't going to get us there alone. It's like, what does that mean in terms of the change that retreat centers themselves have to make to do that? So I think it will look different, and there'll always be a need to gather both in place, but also what does that mean when we change that? Because one of the things that I have noticed for myself in the last year is that before I'd go to a retreat center or a retreat for 5 days or 10 days, and that would be like an intense sense of being on retreat, and then I'd come home and it got longer in terms of how long before I lost that feeling of being on retreat. But one of the things that this year has offered is that I've been doing courses which are a little bit longer, a month or so, and it's really helped that I'm in my home and I'm finding ways to make that practice part of my daily life in different ways. So there's one, the reality of that, but also, as we all know, the retreat process is about slowing down, right? Truly learning how to slow down. And that is much easier when you have a longer amount of time to do that in. You're not just doing it in this very squeezed 5 days and then going back. So these are the interesting things that we have a chance to play with in the coming period. And I think that that's what's really exciting about it. I mean, yeah, all of the practice that we do. I could go on and on and on. So I'll stop because I want to make sure that you have questions. And I also want to play you a piece of music if I can.
Well, I think we could listen to you go on and on and on. And there was just a quick question, and then maybe we'll listen to the music and say goodbye. Bernadette asks, what are our audiences realizing they need in this new time? And I think that goes back to the, like, what are we trying to do and meet people where they're at and provide a sense of belonging and connection. And Deepa, I'm not sure if you want to answer that or if there's space for the chat for others, but what are our audiences realizing they need in this new time?
I'll mention one that I'm hearing. I think that a lot of people are sort of debating whether they're going to get on planes and go to places now. I think that's just going to increase in the next 5 years with climate. And so I think people are going to be much more discerning about when and where they go. We might have a year or two where it's a bounce back of like, yeah, I can get on a plane, I'm going to go. But I think that will be so what I think our audiences are saying is that they're going to be looking for engagement, which isn't just about showing up. And if I do show up somewhere, then I might have different expectations of what I want when I show up. So I think that's going to be a really important thing, because it will need to have something that's deeply related to the place, right? How does that change in terms of what you might do about the land and how you might do physical work? I don't know. That's just one that I'll put out there. But this group looks like it will have far more answers to this question than I've got, really.
Well, maybe we can invite people to populate the chat as I want to honor our time together. And Deepa, would you like to share the music?
Yes, please. Let me just make sure it's up. So this song is called The Blessing Song, and it came out of a book that was written by a wonderful nature writer who wanted to bring words which were kind of losing their meaning, connected to nature in life. And then a group of musicians got together to bring the book alive in music. So and the book is called The Lost Words, and this is the Blessing Song from The Lost Words. I'm actually gonna play you the video so you can see it fully.
No sound.
Oh, you can't hear?
Deepa, we're having difficulty hearing.
Okay, let me see if I can just do it.
And while Deepa works on that, if you have to scoot to your next meeting or next obligation, we understand, and thank you so much. And I've heard this before, and so if you have a couple minutes, I invite you to stay. Perfect, Deepa.
Enter the wild with care, my love, and speak the things you see. Let new names take and root and thrive and grow. And even as you travel far from heather, crag and river, may you like little fisher, set the stream alight with glitter. May you enter now as otter, without falter into water. Look to the sky with care, my love, and speak the things you see. Let new names take and root and thrive and grow. And even as you journey on, past dying stars exploding like the gilded one in flight, leave your little gifts of light. And in the dead of night, my darling, find the gleaming eye of starling, like the little aviator. Sing your heart to all dark matter. Sing the things you see. Let new names take and root and thrive and grow. And even as you stumble through Macher sands eroding, let the fern unfurl your grieving. Let the heron still your breathing. Let the selkie swim you deeper. Little silver seeker, even as the hour grows bleaker, be the singer and the speaker, and in city and in forest, let the larks become your chorus. And when every hope is gone, let the raven call you home.
Thank you so much for letting me join you.
Thank you so
I
much.
appreciate your listening. I'll put the song in the chat.
That'd be wonderful. And a special thank you to Frank, Liz, and Arleen as well. Thank you to all of you who provided insights and asked questions. Have a wonderful day.